So the title of this session is Enhancing the Clinician-Scientist Pathway, and we do want it to be interactive, so I want you all to be thinking of questions for this group. But actually I'm going to start with each of them to give an answer to my first question, or a little spiel, and that is, what can you do as either Executive Dean, a Neonatologist at the Women's and Children's, or the Dean of Research at the University of South Australia? What obstacle can you get out of the way of the clinician scientists that we heard about today? And I'm going to start with Ben.
That's a bit unfair, Steve. Well, there are obviously a few obstacles. I'm not sure it's so much as obstacles as opportunities. I think it's all about, and I should start by saying I think that last session was absolutely incredible. It's all about environment, it's all about culture, and I think it's about passion, and the folks we just saw are an inspiration to us all. And so identifying the challenges and working across institutions, I think, is the first step. Dan alluded to, the precinct effect, the ecosystem that was disrupted when all this was built. It takes some time to recapture that, and I feel that we're doing that. So there's lots of things that involve multi-institutional obstacles that we're working towards. What are we doing within the university? I think one example would be our new medical degree, which has a dedicated research component in 6th year, and I think that's an extraordinary opportunity. It's coming up in 5 years. An extraordinary opportunity to really give our medical students an opportunity to do proper research, whether that be in a lab, whether that be clinical trials, whether it be public health. So I think planning ahead to give students really credible, quality experience in research before they graduate, before they start moving into a clinical environment, is important. And then thinking as institutions together again about how we create those opportunities to do the PhD and the consultancy training at the same time. And obviously there's plenty of examples in our own country, let alone internationally, and we're exploring that in this precinct and elsewhere. So I think it's a team effort, lots of different opportunities to make change, but I think you can see all the elements in this room and across this precinct for a start. So I'm really positive about what we can do here in South Australia. Thanks, Ben.
Susan, perhaps I can just add, and I'm sure you were going to anyway, but allied health and nursing, because we've been very medically orientated, which is the nature of it a little bit, unfortunately. But what about the obstacles in allied health and nursing for research?
Yeah, we had, I think one of the key things for people to take on as a challenge rather than obstacle is to train yourself up. Like, this is about getting a skill set. And obviously, Ben and I are biased because we work for universities, and this is our business, is training and development. So thinking about what sort of skills that you need. So you had the question about basic science skills, so all the different lab skills. I think honouring that those skills are a profession in their own right is the first thing, that this is not just something that you can pick up because you're very bright students. These are professions that you're, with a very unique set of skills. And also recognising that research skills go across a big range. So this is alluding to the allied health stuff. And nursing is that we are not so much in basic sciences and in labs, but honouring the research skills, particularly heading into the translational implementation science skills, which you would have heard from Alison earlier today, and also the qualitative skill sets. Qualitative research isn't my area, but I've really learned to appreciate it. We do a big clinical trial and we get results that are somewhat equivocal, and I go to my qualitative cousins, if you like, my colleagues, who then go and do the lived experience interviews to help us understand the results of our mixed models analysis. So respecting the full gamut, I think, of research, and that particularly because often those research methods that are perhaps not as well understood are more in the allied health and nursing. I mean, Alison may or may not agree, but I think that's a really important thing, and to skill yourself up in those things. And I've really learned to respect and value having that mixed methods approach. So partake of any training that you can, even outside your comfort zone, and we've been running a lot of, we have a relationship with SA Health where we run training workshops for allied health clinicians across the state. I think we've had something like 800 people in the last 3 years do research training. So there's a lot of people who want to learn about research skills, and this varies from, you know, basic research design, which people have done in their undergraduate years, but probably, let's just say when we're undergrads, we don't know why we're learning this stuff. So coming back as a postgraduate, getting research skills, formalising that in that kind of apprenticeship model in a PhD, which you've all heard today, recognising that PhD is training, and entering into that with an open mind and not just a tick box attitude would be my current pet concern, that PhDs have become very much orthodox, which I liked your list. They shouldn't be orthodox, they should be, you know, they should be diverse, they should be inquiring, they should be risky. So that would be some of my answers. Thanks,
Susan. Amy, who gets in helicopters and goes and retrieves. Amy came to our board meeting, by the way, in her gear that she just got in out of a helicopter, and the board was just blown away by having this researcher and helicopter flyer all in one. So tell us, Amy, what would enhance the sort of career that you've had or made your career easier?
That's an excellent question. Thank you, Steve, and thank you for never forgetting when I turned up in red pants. I think I've been very fortunate in that, as I've had medical training and have worked as a clinician, that I haven't ever really had to worry about income. So I guess that's, but I think for my allied health colleagues, especially nursing, midwifery, physiotherapy, that is much more of a concern. The way that I guess I've done it more at an individual level, because I'm not in charge of anything major like a university, but has been giving, like, taking opportunities, but actually actively trying to push them out to my colleagues and people that I might be supervising that it might be a little bit out of their comfort zone. So encouraging my registrars, my nursing and midwifery colleagues to even start out with something small, like writing an evidence-based review, coming along to a quality improvement workshop, like really trying to focus on making it multidisciplinary. Because as I sort of go through my career and having done a PhD and then now sort of making a slight sidestep into medical management and leadership, the skill set that's come from my research training as well as the multidisciplinary team environment that I'm really quite comfortable and very much appreciate working in has actually been extremely valuable in making that temporary transition that way. I think it's really important that those of us who are in positions of privilege and who have access to, you know, being able to share information about workshops, opportunities, papers, and those types of things, that we do push them out to people and not just to those that come and knock on our door, because otherwise I think we're in danger of just getting more and more people like ourselves, and we need to make sure that, you know, we step outside of our own boundaries and make sure that, you know, we offer those opportunities far and wide.
Thanks, Amy. They've answered that question. I'd now like to open it up to everyone else. We have an opportunity here, obviously, to ask people who have influence at the university and the hospital level what they can do to enhance the clinician-scientist pathway. So any questions from the audience? Pete.
Bit of a provocative one. How are we going to convince the hospitals that clinical academics are an absolute asset and they should be, you know, one, they should be prominent within departments, and two, they should be protected and supported. So until we get that culture in Callum and Salem and Allen, we're not going to have great clinician scientists.
It's an easy question for me to answer from an allied health point of view. We have no joint appointments in South Australia for allied health. I think there's some coming in nursing. I couldn't answer for that. Alison maybe could. But I mean, we are not even on the 8-ball table, let alone behind the 8-ball. And you know, allied health clinicians who want to do research, it's a hobby. They have to do it. They can apply for some study time, but they're more likely to get study time if it's a clinical course than a research training course. So we've got all these, you know, these 800 people that have come to our workshops, and they go back and you know, they go back to their clinic, and then we re-engage with them. I said, look, I haven't even been able to put a pen to paper because I don't have time. And of course, COVID's a great rock to hide under at the moment. So, we are trying to engage with the LHNs. I know Adelaide and Flinders are as well, about joint appointments. Money's tight in the health system in South Australia. And I'd have to say allied health we're on the bottom of the pile or the back of the list, but we're still trying from a university point of view, because certainly it's a model that's working very well in the other states and has been for many years. But you just got me on my hobby horse there. So not provocative. I would have been guaranteed to talk about that.
Or can I put a plug in first to say with the Women's and Children's Health Network, I've had a paper on one of our advisory committees for might be 2 years now, but it's looking quite promising that we will have some joint funding for, say, a Women's and Children's Health Network position where it's half research, half clinical. And my particular bugbear for that is that it's a postdoctoral position, and ideally, we would be focusing on non-medical. So we might be one of the smaller LHNs, but I think that's a particularly strong model, I think, and interstate have really great models where the hospitals either partner with a charitable foundation or another interested group and get it done that way, because non-medical people are probably they're cheaper and probably better value, right, in many respects.
We are such good value.
Ben.
Well, it's a very good question, Pete, and I think people like yourself and the previous speakers, many of the people in this room are absolutely critical to it. We know that. It takes leadership from clinician researchers within the health networks. From an institutional perspective, we're working extraordinarily hard across the health networks, and I think I've yet to meet someone who, at a high level in the LHNs, who doesn't want to see research regain momentum in South Australia, who's not interested in the idea of research-informed patient care. If we look at the relationship between us and Kile, we have Andrew Zanatino in that joint role to try and sort of stimulate research strategy. Helen's appointment between us and the Women's and Children's, I think, is another example of the two institutions, the university and the hospital, recognising that we need to do better. The South Australian Productivity Commission has identified it. I've got my own Vice-Chancellor talking about the importance of clinician researchers. So COVID has disrupted us and slowed us down, but I do feel in South Australia that the planets have aligned somewhat, that you don't hear too many people saying, wow, research, really, it's, I think we've got work to do. We've got a lot of work to do, but a lot of the green shoots are there and some of the key appointments, but it's leadership from all of us in the room at every level, every interaction. Your point about supervision of students, I think, is so critical. Students are not cannon fodder. Students are the future and deserve as much love and attention as our own children do, and I think that is a critical point. It's at every level, this research endeavour, and the beauty of it is the diversity of the people you see in the room, the diversity of research topics, techniques, disciplines, professions, but it takes all of us. But I think I've sensed in the last 3 years some really positive changes in SA. Maybe we haven't gone as far as we would have without COVID, but I think we are moving in the right direction. I'm really hopeful that our new state government in particular is going to be a real boost for us in that space.
Can I just have a comment? So, yeah, I think it's all about the research culture, and it's not just at the organisational level saying, yes, supporting protected research time. So I've sort of been going around, I've only been in the position a couple of months, but meeting with heads of departments, and you actually need the heads of departments to also ensure that their staff have allocated research time. So I think you sort of need it at both levels, and I'm getting good responses to that they are actually looking at the workload for their team and making sure that there is some research time. Maybe they're just telling me that, but it's at multiple levels.
Need to formalise it though and have a clinical
Yeah.
and a research lead. Mayo, as a clinician at Mayo, you had to wear one of 2 or 4 hats: clinician, teacher, researcher, or admin. You couldn't just be a clinician.
Yeah.
It's not how the great institutes work. Do we need to formalise something within our networks?
Yeah.
At a department level.
Yeah, and I think the idea here is that you're actually giving them each an opportunity to spend time in research. You're obviously going to have those that want to spend more and stronger research. It gives everybody an opportunity. Yeah.
Amy, maybe you can comment on Pete's point about whether the hospitals need to formalise the research. I mean, a lot of the hospitals are now moving to research directors, and with the example of Helen. But what about at a departmental level? Do they need to formalise a research strategy for each department?
Would be helpful. In theory, as a salaried medical officer in South Australia in the public system, you have 70-30, so 70% clinical, 30% non-clinical, although I think you'll find the reality is it's more like 120% clinical. It would be lovely to have protected research time and to have people that, I did some training in Toronto, and it was that clinician research, clinician educator, clinician admin was very, very clear. That was helpful in some ways, but I guess it's very structured differently with the relationships with the universities. Like everyone was sort of jointly appointed, and you didn't get a job in a large public academic centre without either being one of those things and having a track record. So it's probably, we're still, I think in South Australia, often in the public hospital system, still set up for clinicians being the primary role. Having, I guess, some more flexibility within the public system around what your role is. So why are you there? And if you've got a colleague that wants to work 100% clinical, they can do that, and then you get 50-50 time, as long as as long as you can show that you're productive, because there's also, you can get a clinical academic role and you have it for life, and doesn't matter what you produce or not. I don't know, is that what we're looking at? That's also not ideal either. And it also makes it really hard for those of us that haven't got one of those positions to get one of those positions, because they're ongoing. So yeah, there's a few barriers. Ben,
did you want to comment on that?
Thank you, Steve. Yes, it's something we're acutely aware of, and we discuss a lot with our clinical academics, with our clinical affiliates, and the health networks and the university. I think the relationship between those joint appointments and how they operate has been drifting somewhat, at least on our university side of the fence. So we've got some work to do. We have some extraordinary folks who are clinical academics. Our university literally would not function without our title holders. So an unbelievable pool of talented, passionate, committed people, but have we got the mix right from our side? I think it's clear that we don't. So we're working with the health networks to try and understand that a little better. And the Productivity Commission, again, did highlight some of the issues that most of us probably intuitively knew were there, but did it very, very clearly. So I think we do have opportunities to make meaningful change. I like the 2 or 4 hats thing, Pete. I think, having postdoced in the US, I think one of the things the Americans do very, very well in our space is that they, being an incredible teacher, an incredible clinician, an incredible researcher, they're all good things. But if you're two of those things, even better. And if you're the triple threat, as they say, then that's the holy grail sort of thing. And the Americans really do lionise and idealise that ability to work right across this whole ecosystem. And I think, we do it, but I don't think we're as explicit about it, and I think we need to be.
Thanks, Ben.
I was just going to also say, I think, and again, I feel like I'm spruiking the uni thing, but research is such a complex business now, and I think, we grapple with the sole trader idea, that you're the researcher and you do the research, and it's not like that anymore. You're a part of a team, and you need the dedicated statistician to help you with the most basic of trials now. The methodologists, you need the health economist. This idea of some research leader who's doing it as a sole trader is just a dead concept. So how do we allow that teamwork to happen across institutions, I think is a really great conversation for us to have, so that the clinician-scientist doesn't feel like they've got to carry everything, that they actually can join a team. And that's quite a different mindset, I think, to actually having that kind of, figurehead sort of idea.
Thanks for that. Jenny.
Thanks, Steve. And thanks for your opening remarks. I just wanted to make a couple of comments. One was about clinical academics. I do think it's time that we actually reviewed the model because we've got such a broad range of other clinical scientists teaching and doing really good research who are not clinical academics. And I think we need to have a refreshed model and a model that picks up nursing and allied health as well. And I think the other point I wanted to make was around translational research, in that one of the strongest things we could do is demonstrate to the system the importance of translational research and the impact that it can have on patient outcomes. Because after all, we're all here for the patient. And so it's patient outcomes that must send a really powerful message to help us reform the whole research agenda. And the final comment I wanted to make was, and I guess this is probably to Susan and Ben and Amy as well, is the model that Shilpa talked about in the nephrology unit at the RA. Is that a model that we should try and replicate across other units? Because as a full-time clinician, as opposed to a researcher doing clinical work, it sounds like she's starting to change the culture of her unit to generate an interest in research across all the disciplines within the unit. And is that a model that we should try and pursue across the system? Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Jenny. Anyone want to comment on that?
Oh, I can kick off. So obviously I totally agree with you about revisiting the clinician academic model. I mean, the only way I could maintain my clinical work was to continue to work in the university clinic. So I couldn't have, otherwise I'd have to have two jobs. I'd have to be employed by SA Health and the university. There was no way to do it as one job. So it's hard, that's a structural issue that I've overcome to maintain my own clinical practice for the last several decades. But it shouldn't necessarily have to be like that, but maybe that is a model. And I think the universities are increasingly entering the health service sphere. We run a lot of our own clinics at UniSA simply to get clinical placements for training purposes. But we're using those clinics now for research, and what you said triggered one of our recent DVCREs used to say research in everything. So if you're teaching, research in teaching. If your clinical practice, there's research in that. So this idea of research in everything, I think, is actually a great mantra for us to think about in our clinical practice. That that even our patients, in a sense, are a single case study. And having that mindset, if that can come through even, when we're doing our undergraduate training, I think would help. And then I think that really does manifest then in what you've achieved with the renal, the unit. And, some of our students work with you and they love it. They just love it because they're at the coalface, but they really feel like they're advancing clinical practice and they feel valued. I think that's the key that I've heard, with the projects there that are happening. So I think that and that multidisciplinary stuff, so that it does take that village kind of approach. I think it's a great idea, a great process.
And yes, I totally agree in that what I'd like to try and say I'm doing is running an applied health services research program. So most of my focus is in quality improvement, clinical practice improvement, and I'm hoping that I'm able to take that methodology and that approach into how I run my current unit and try and embed that into our sort of, almost everyday practice and really, cut that divide of I'm not a researcher or a clinician, like this is what we do in our everyday work. And I think also, especially for clinicians that don't have a research background, looking at things like quality improvement is actually a really good first step in and a nice way of embedding research and, this around translation, all of that. Like, it has to be part of our everyday clinical work. It just makes sense. I think it's a no-brainer.
Ben, did you have anything?
Well, I'd make 2 points. One, I think Shilpa's example does demonstrate the importance of individual leadership, and just goes to show what you can achieve when you, as you say, when you can't find it, you build it. So I think whether or not that model can be replicated across Callan, we'll ask Jerry what he thinks. But hats off to Shilpa and team. The other point I'd make is that this goes both ways, that just as, the universities infiltrate the hospitals and have a role to play clearly, clinicians should be infiltrating labs like Pete's. That's what SAMRI's for. So I think I love to see more and more clinicians of all stripes get involved in basic science. Dan's a shining example of that, or something else that's not necessarily within a hospital unit. There's research is the most extraordinarily diverse activity. There is no one size fits all. Shilpa's experience, try it. I think it was Shilpa I was going to disagree with. She said, you need to identify and understand everything and know what the challenges are. My advice would be don't learn too much before you jump into this. Just learn just enough, find some incredible people and just jump in.
Thanks, Ben.
First of all, I'm a med student, but from a student's perspective, I feel like if I got a big interest in research, I feel a bit difficult to reach out the researcher I want. So right now, I'm doing is just like randomly sending the emails to the researcher I'm interested.
That is exactly the right approach. Bug them, bug everybody, bug all these people.
Yeah, so because like I think sitting here, we are thinking about how to promote the culture or improve our system. So I have an idea that if is this possible to have a program or a platform for every stakeholder to do a matching system for some if some students like really interested in research, so he can put his or her applications, and then some researchers just pick it. So that's why. So I think this is like kind of a mutual beneficial process. Yeah.
No, I think it's a great question. It's sort of either a dating process or a matching process or a registry or something. Yeah. Does someone want to comment on that? Ben?
You go first with the MD. Would that be covered by the MD process that you're starting?
Well, I mean, different programs, different schools, different departments, universities, clinical units have different ways of doing it. The kind of making the opportunities available, and it goes to Amy's point about making it available to all, I think is a challenge for us, as institutional leaders, and certainly something we're thinking about in the context of this precinct, building the bridges that Dan's talking about. But part of that is doing exactly what you're talking about, is, well, how do we make it known what our researchers are doing, where they live, what opportunities there are, and how do we connect them with bright young folks who want to get involved. I think we have been derailed by COVID in trying to understand that a little better. It's a really, really important point, because that first experience of research can in many ways make or break your desire to go further. And if it's a great experience, and even if it's not, it can make you think, well, maybe I don't want to do hardcore molecular biology. I do want to move more into the clinical space. So creating those opportunities is something we're giving a lot of thought to. I don't think we have for instance, a precinct-wide platform, but we are, as institutions, where's Maria and Jenny's there, as institutions we're talking about exactly that, how to break down those barriers and open up what we do so that people like yourself can understand who's here, who's who in the zoo and what do they do and how can you get involved. So watch this space, and thank you for the question.
Yeah, I just remembered we do run a mentoring program. Oh, I forgot. So part of our relationship with SA Health, this is for allied health practitioners only, is one of the things that they wanted was a mentoring process. So allied health clinicians can apply through the ASHO office for a mentor, and then we look at what they need. Sometimes it's as simple as being twinned with a statistician, sometimes someone to hold their hand while they're doing ethics, sometimes it's actually about the design or something like this. And that process is working really well. I think we've supplied about 20, maybe 30 mentors, relationships to clinicians in SA Health over the last 3 years. I think it could do better and have a little bit more of a training focus because mentoring can be quite passive. And I think people need to be clear what a mentor is. You know, mentor isn't somebody who just opens doors for you and introduces to people, gives you stuff. You know, it's not that kind of thing. Mentoring is really about facilitating. So just so long as we're clear about what that relationship is, I think it is really an important part of building teams. So, you know, that's something that we could think about more. But really, I mean, the best training for research is to come and do a PhD, and then you get that mentoring relationship in the supervision, and it's, you know, that's the most rigorous way. So I think ultimately that's the dive in. If you know, that's the entry point for research, is from what I can see.
This is sort of a question for Ben. It's probably a little bit oddly specific, but with the new MD program that university is implementing, and there's a focus on research at the end of it, as a PhD student who wants to go on to be a clinical scientist who hasn't yet done a medical degree, it's a little bit disappointing to see that the only university, firstly in South Australia, that offers a postgraduate medical program is Flinders, and that there's no consideration for any postgraduate degrees. Doing a PhD and going on to do medicine is arguably incomparable to someone who's done an undergraduate degree and passed the GAMSAT and, you know, got through an interview. Will there be any concession with the University out of Adelaide doing any form of postgraduate, medical degree, and acknowledging students that have gone on and done a PhD and honours degree and excelled in research to then fulfil a career of clinical science, I guess, and their admission into the university?
It's a very good question. There was much discussion about the new MD and postgraduate medicine, and I think I wasn't here at the time, but I think the conversation settled on there are two medical schools in the state. One's doing postgrad, one's doing school leaver, and that was to remain status quo. So that's the MD has remained an undergraduate program for that reason. In terms of scientifically trained folks who've done PhDs then going on and do medicine, I know a handful of people who are doing exactly that. We've gone on to postgrad med at Flinders, having done PhDs at Adelaide Uni Medical School and in the nursing school. They're extraordinary folks doing, now combining what they know in research through their medical program, in some cases still involved in research, in some cases they've got grants that they obtained as junior postdocs. So, as frustrating as the university program structures might be, I don't want you to think that your career is in any way circumscribed by the order in which you do things, or the fact that you may feel that you've gone down an alley, a blind alley, and now you're reversing. All those experiences that you're gathering are just so critically important and formative. So there is no formula for this. So medicine, there are obviously opportunities to do medicine, and if that's what you're interested in doing, I'd encourage you to do it. I'm just a scientist, I'm not a doctor. I often regret not having done... A humble molecular biologist is what I am, and I often regret not having done medicine, but then I wouldn't have done what I have done if I had, because I would have been busy doing all kinds of other things and getting up at 2 o'clock in the morning like Pete does. So yes, I absolutely take your point about the medical program. I've told you the reason why it's structured the way it is. Might there be change? Possibly. You know, there's talk of university mergers. Anything's possible down the track, but in your own circumstances, don't feel that any options are closed or that the order in which you do things dictates a particular outcome. The world is your oyster.
Thanks for that. We're just a little bit over time, so I'm happy to wrap it up, but I'm also happy if anyone wants to make a final comment before we stop.
I would just say the fact that you're here is a fantastic step. I'd go back to what I said earlier. If you are at all interested, go and bug as many people as you can find. Knock on their door, send them emails, ring them up. Most researchers of any stripe are more than happy to talk about what they do. They're excited when bright young people come along and they're interested in what they might be doing. You don't have to commit, they don't have to commit. Just go and bug as many people as you can, and then one day you'll meet someone like Shilpa and you'll think, oh, I want to do that.
Susan, did you want to say anything? You don't have to.
I can talk underwater with my mouth full of marbles. It's occurring to me that a lot of times I talk with people who are looking at a research career, got a clinical background, or they kind of say, well, we want to be like you, we want to do research, we want to teach, we want to be clinicians, and recognising that you got to want to do the process. It's not the outcome. It's not being like that person. It's actually about that process of learning those skills and applying those skills and knowledge. So do it for the process, not for that outcome, would be my advice.
I think if you want to get started or have a bit of an idea, don't forget about, you don't always have to ask the most prominent person in research, because often they're the busiest and might not get back to you. Like asking people that are sort of mid-level as well, or even those people that might at this point be doing a PhD or be postdoc, about potential opportunities. They might have a small project that they're keen to have a hand with, or some sort of opportunity over summer. So don't forget the other people as well. Yeah.
Thanks, Amy. So I think we're a few minutes over time, so we're going to stop there.